Welcome to Our Father's House with me, Amanda Clinton. On today's programme, we're going to be discussing how one can step into their place of fulfilment, essentially, by calling those things that are not as if they were. And in that view, the scripture I have in mind is taken from Isaiah 61 from verse 3, which looks at how God has said that he will comfort all who mourn in Zion. He will grant those who mourn in Zion to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. And that was just taken from Isaiah 61 from verse 3, because on Our Father's House today, we're concentrating on how one can essentially step into their wealthy place, because some of us have been mourning, and we've been mourning because we are still awaiting God's appointed time. We're still awaiting his comfort. And we can mourn essentially, because people mourn for different reasons, but essentially over our past mistakes. We can mourn over errors in judgment and our choices that we've made in life, and just repeating that particular cycle over and over again in our lives. And we can also mourn over the fact that, we're imperfect, and we know that we can be better, essentially. And people mourn for different reasons. Sometimes it's because, we have inconsistent relationships with God. We want to get closer to him, and yet we feel separated because of our nature, and feel separated because we may not think that we are good enough. And yet the prophet Isaiah is telling us at Isaiah 61 from verse 3 that God will essentially give beauty for the ashes that is our lives. So even though we may mourn because we want to be more useful in God's house, and yet our sin separates us from him, and even though we may mourn because of our imperfections, the message today in Our Father's House is essentially that if we trust in how far God has brought us this far, if we trust in the fact that we have different seasons in our life, and that we should learn from each season and ultimately know that everything is a lesson to teach us, and if we trust in the fact that he can take us from a place of desertion, a place of famine, and bring us to a beautiful place where he will bless us, but first we must go through the trial, essentially. And ultimately, as it states at Ecclesiastes 3 from verse 1, to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. We live our lives in seasons and need to appreciate that, because sometimes in failing to appreciate that, yes, this is a difficult time, but we will overcome, we may miss the point of what God is teaching us in everything, even if it does not look like a lesson, and even if it does not look like a blessing sometimes, because, sometimes the challenge of life is that every season has its own beauty and has its own burden, and we need to appreciate both sides, essentially. And ultimately, we need to appreciate the fact that God has said in the Bible that the glory of the latter house will be greater than the former house, in terms of even if we feel as if what was behind us was so much better than the experience that we are going through, if we trust and we believe that there is something ahead for us, if we believe in God, then surely that too will come to pass. So even though the issues of our life may be ashes, even though the issues of our life may be winter, though weeping may endure for a night, joy comes in the morning, because ultimately we will get beauty, as the prophet Isaiah 61:3 states, because we will not remember our shame, we will not remember our past, we will not remember our mistakes or our youthful indiscretions. And ultimately, as Isaiah 64 states, It will be something that is so much the past that there will be no memory of it, but we must learn to walk in our destiny and ultimately walk in our future. So as we focus today on how God will ultimately give us beauty for ashes in terms of the ashes that is our life, if we give that to him, he will give us beauty in terms of peace. He will give us beauty in terms of joy. He will give us beauty in terms of a new beginning. And let us have faith in this and let us believe it with all sincerity, because whatever you believe will surely come to pass. And so if you do not believe in the strength and the destiny of what God has said he will give you, then surely that won't come to pass if you don't believe in it. But if we believe that there is an expected end, and if we believe that if we walk in these precepts that God has shown us, if we humble ourselves, if we turn to him, then surely he will bless us, and not just for a generation, but for generations and generations to come. Because a place of rest, a place of beauty, a place of peace is ultimately what we're all searching for in life. And we're all searching for that because we need a sense of comfort. And that's why Isaiah 61 from verse 3 talks about how God will comfort those who mourn. Because even though we may be a place of mourning at an appointed time, at an appointed season, God will raise us up for times such as this. But first we must start walking in the destiny that we want to go in. We must start building and edifying ourselves, and ultimately knowing that even though we don't see the glory coming to pass, even if we don't see a breakthrough just around the corner, let us know that God has said in Isaiah 61 verse 3 that he will comfort us. He will comfort those who mourn in Zion, who mourn in his restful place, to the extent that what they have said about us, how they have named us, how they have attempted to shame us, will be of no use and no significance, because the place of rest and peace that he will ultimately bring us to will be so full of a blessing, so full of honey and so full of our expected end, that we will surely know that it is of God, and our youthful indiscretions will truly be forgotten. So as we focus today on Isaiah 61 and how God has said that he will give us beauty for the ashes that is our life, let us also focus on the fact that beauty in God's house is not a place of misery. Beauty in God's house is not a place of desperation. It's not a place of shame or debt or lack in any sense. Beauty means that the ashes that is our current situation, the ashes that is our life, will be exchanged for something else, a sense of peace, a sense of purpose, a sense of knowing why and who created us, and also to walk in the destiny that God predestined before the foundations of the earth. And so if we are seeking this morning to be filled with God's glory, if we are seeking to be the sort of temples that are worthy of use in his house, let us know that glory is the manifested goodness of God in all aspects of our life. So if we are not seeing the manifested goodness, let us know that to each time there is a season. And if we are walking in a place of winter or in a place of spring, let us know that manifested goodness is something that will come. But let us also wait on God's time and wait on the fact that in this period of development, we are learning. In this period of development, we are growing spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. And this period of development that just seems like ashes, that is our lives, as the prophet Isaiah states in Isaiah 61. If we believe in the manifested goodness of the glory that God will bring to us, then surely that too will come to pass, because peace often is being able to walk in the destiny that God has for you. Peace is knowing that you are going in the right direction. Peace is embracing all that God has for you. Peace is experiencing life beyond what you currently know in your current state. And so if you have, for instance, this morning, all the money in the world, and everybody thinks you have a great life, and yet you are lacking because you know inside that dirty little secret that you are miserable, that secret that you are desperate or in shame or in debt, because you're emotionally lacking. I just want to encourage you this morning to focus on Isaiah 61 from verse 3, which essentially talks about how God will give us beauty for the ashes that is our life. So whatever is lacking, whatever is broken, whatever has been called, whatever we have been shamed by, if we truly believe in the beauty of what God has for us, then that surely will come to pass. And ultimately, God is the person that has led us this far, in terms of if we still have breath in us, and that means we have a purpose to still work out of us. And if we remember all those times where, we could have been affected, we could have been broken, we could have been like the people that didn't make it this far, and yet God has seen us through. And so let us not forsake God in terms of forsake knowing Him and knowing His principles when it is a time for us to get closer. Because even though we may feel as if we are separated from God because of our sin, we are separated from God because of our differences, we are separated from God because we no longer pray to Him, we no longer worship Him, we no longer go to church, we no longer seek His face. Let us be encouraged that even when we were in sin before, we were still searching for God. So let us not make excuses as to why we cannot go after the God that protected and guided and looked after us at our point of need. And let us know ultimately that the God who predestined us is the one who will ensure that that thing that He has put inside us, that destiny that He has birthed inside us, will come to pass, and will not only come to pass so that everybody sees, but will come to pass in His season and in His own time. So as we go out this morning, I just want you to concentrate particularly on Isaiah 61, because the prophet Isaiah is essentially saying that the Spirit of the Lord God is upon him, because the Lord has anointed him to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent him to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prisons to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that He may be glorified. So as you go out this morning, I want you to particularly focus on Isaiah 61, which talks about getting the oil of gladness, the garment of praise, and being given a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, if we walk in God's righteousness, and if we know ultimately that if He has said it, that He will do it. And He that predestined us will not leave us standing, but first we must truly believe that He has the power to change a faint spirit into the garment of praise. So if you feel as if you have a faint spirit this morning, if you feel as if you are mourning, if you feel as if you have ashes in terms of your life is ashes, let us meditate on Isaiah 61, which essentially talks about how God will give you a beautiful headdress instead of ashes that is your life. He will give you the oil of gladness instead of mourning. He will give you the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that He may be glorified. So let us meditate on Isaiah 61 today, and let us know that God ultimately wants the best for us, and that if we truly want more for ourselves in terms of a sense of peace, in terms of gladness, in terms of this spirit that is filled instead of a faint spirit, let us focus on God and know who and what He is, and get closer to Him, because though we may feel as if our sin separates us from God, let us know that He is never far from us. But first we must at least attempt to talk to Him, to pray to Him, and to be strengthened by Him, and ultimately to walk in the destiny that He has for us. And in so doing, we will truly bring to pass what He has predestined before the foundations of the earth.